We have not seen this kind of an aftershock with regard to a recession since the Great Depression. And it requires us to rethink what this economy is all about, what's happening now. It's not a typical cyclical phenomenon. It's structural. There's something very fundamental going on. And until we face that fundamental reality, and until we understand the choice in front of us, then we're going to be wallowing in this aftershock for a very long time. The structural problem we are dealing with is that although the economy has been growing for the last 30 years, almost all of the gains of growth have gone to a small sliver of people at the top. I mean, 30 years ago, the top 1% was taking home around 9% of total income. And then more and more of the income got concentrated at the top to the point where by 2007, the top 1% was taking home about 23.5% of total income. And the problem is that when you get that kind of a lopsided distribution, there's no way that the vast middle class has enough purchasing power to buy the goods and services the economy is capable of producing. There are remarkable connections and parallels between the Great Recession and the Great Depression. First of all, if you look at the two peak years where the top 1% of the population was taking home over 23% of total income, when were they? Well, one was 1928, and of course we know what happened in 1929, that was the Great Crash. The other was 2007, and we know that what happened in 2008 and thereafter. The choice, as a practical matter, and people will come to understand this, is between either reform that expands the circle of prosperity and enables more and more Americans to partake in the gains of economic growth, or a reactionary politics that turns us against each other and against the rest of the world. Our politics follows from our economics and vice versa. If people are angry and frustrated and worried about their jobs, if they feel that they are not getting ahead, and if they feel that the dice are loaded against them, that somehow the economy is fixed, that government and business are in cahoots, that's when you ignite the kind of social change that could be very progressive and very reform-minded, but also could be very reactionary. Look at the anger against immigrants, against undocumented workers in this country. We have fewer undocumented workers today than we had 5 years ago, and yet we are seeing this upsurge of legislation, highly punitive legislation, against people simply because they are immigrants. What's going on here? Well, a lot of this, not all of it, but a lot of it is related to economic fear, economic anxiety, and the cynical use of that by people who simply want to gain prominence and power. The ideas in the book, Aftershock, they're not out of the mainstream, they're not right-wing or left-wing, they are doable. They're practical ideas. They're the kind of ideas that we in the United States have the capacity to adopt if we just get out of our ideological fixations, that somehow the market is the only way to go, or government is evil, or that there is not inevitably a complete mix between the private and public sector already. Put the labels aside and just think practically. How can we get more money into people's pockets so that they can turn around and be consumers in the short term? And over the long term, how can we make them more valuable so that they can justifiably earn more money? I'm very optimistic about the future. I'm a student of American history, and I know that every time we really come up against a crisis, a real challenge to our moral fiber, we roll up our sleeves and get on with what has to be done. We put ideology aside. We don't call ourselves liberals or conservatives or fascists or socialists or communists. We don't get into name calling. We just get very pragmatic and we do what needs to be done. We did that in the Great Depression. We did that in the Second World War. We did that in the struggles over civil rights and voting rights. We did that in the Vietnam War. We did it again and again, and we're going to do it again.